Hey everybody, Riot Mort here with Riot Statikk as well, and we are back for the patch 1022 Post Mortem. And good news, Statikk, I hear you have a new mic.
I do. It's really nice. I hope I'm not hurting people's ears anymore by not being able to hear me.
Nice. So as always, if this is your first one, Patch Post Mortem is where we go over the last patch, talk about what we thought went right, what we thought went wrong, where we can get better from this, and just our chance to sort of talk to you guys about, where we're going and things like that. So with that, let's dive into it. Uh, on the system side, we had a really easy change, which was players now take a minimum of 1 damage on loss. This was mostly to prevent the situation at stage 2 where you would lose to only a Galio and still be at 100 health. It was very confusing, so now you're at 99. This was a good change, but with a side effect that we kind of missed. Unfortunately, now in that case where you lose to just Galio, on like stage 3, you're actually taking 1 extra damage than we intended. So this was kind of poorly worded, in the sense where it says you take a minimum of 1 damage. Hopefully, we'll clean that up in a future patch. But for now, like it definitely was worth even that side effect. So I'm glad we made this change. Cool. Chosen role chances are now displayed in the shop tooltip. This is just slam dunk. Am I right?
I mean, more information. Why not?
Yep. Yep. So this was good. Happy with this. Always looking to add more clarity into the game, so that's good. Sweet. Okay, cultist chosen now counts as 2 cultists and grants Galio the same amount of star levels, and we did this for Keeper as well. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, these were two, especially Keeper, two traits that were struggling a ton before this patch. I think Keeper obviously is still struggling a bunch, and we have changes coming up for that. But I think these were good because just these specific traits were a bit weird with how they were working with the chosen system. So I feel like this made it a lot easier to take these two traits. Arguably, it may have made Cultist chosen a little too strong in the early game, but I feel like we could massage those numbers out eventually if it gets that way. But yeah, that's my thoughts.
Yeah, I agree. It definitely made Keeper chosen less of a trap, which was great. Cultist chosen, I agree, maybe a little strong in the early game. It's a real good win streak, but to be honest, that was kind of Cultist purpose before that last change anyway, so pretty happy with that. Okay, Dazzler. We changed the AD reduction from 50 to 50-80, but changed the duration to 8 seconds at every level. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy that Dazzler feels like it kind of became a real trait this patch. It does feel like we overdid it a bit. I feel like the duration in particular was a hard tuning point for me personally because in the set, the way it's just structured, like Morgana is just a really like the best Dazzler by like 20 million miles. And it feels like we kind of have to just like tune all the Dazzler numbers around her. So the 8 seconds was kind of meant to be for more like, okay, if I'm playing Lissandra or like Lux, the dazzle duration will actually be long enough to feel like it was worth it. But it honestly just kind of ended up buffing Morgana a bunch in a lot of ways. But yeah, that's how it felt for me. I don't know what you think, Mark.
Yeah, I mostly agree. I think the change to Dazzler 4 was a huge slam dunk, to be honest. I think now we actually see people willing to take Dazzler Lissandra in the early game, possibly run for Dazzler. So that's been good. It's still rare, which is kind of what we expect. But yeah, I think 2 Dazzler right now has ended up in a bit of a too strong a spot. And like you said, it's like the Morgana plus Lux plus Shen combo is just like it's too good, and so
Yeah.
but we'll see in 1023 we're addressing some of that. But like direction wise, I still think this was correct. Again, 4 Dazzler feels like a real trait now.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, 2 Dazzler for how easy it is to access feels a little strong. So, all right, Ninja. We did a slight reduction to Ninja to 140. I might be crazy, maybe you disagree, but it finally feels like the Ninja trait is right about where it should be. It's an insanely strong trait, not overbearing, but still has some win conditions. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think Ninja. I just want to give some insight into like the trait balancing in general. It's really hard to understand exactly how much power should be coming from like a trait versus the champion spells, themselves. It's something that I don't want to say the word struggle, but like we've been back and forth on sometimes in a set. A comp is really trait heavy versus champion heavy, and I think Ninja, and we ended up pushing it to a point where it felt like maybe the only way to play these units was in for Ninja. I think reducing that just a little bit is basically going to allow us, as you guys will see in the next patch, a little bit more room to hopefully buff up some of the ninjas themselves and make those units a little bit more flexible. So I like where this went, but I'm not 100% sure still on like how much of that allocation should be per comp. Like how much power is a ninja versus Kennen and Zed.
Yeah.
So
cool. Sharpshooter, we buffed 2, nerfed 6. What are your thoughts here?
I mean, I'm happy the way it turned out. I was scared at the time of putting in this change. The 6 nerf sounded really severe on paper. I know you mapped it out more, and we were like, "Uh-oh, is that too much?" I do think it's kind of just made it less necessary to go 6. I still feel like 6 is still powerful just by default of getting more stun duration, and it's not like 5% is nothing. So I really like where it's landed. We still have work to do, I think, in the Sharpshooter comp, but that'll be coming up in the future.
Yeah, so Sharpshooter was actually my favorite comp before it got popular. It was like what I used to climb to Grandmaster, actually. I played a lot of Sharpshooter, so really familiar with it. I still think I'm the one who made Blue Buff Shojin the popular build. But what I will say with this change is it came at a weird time, which was like we shipped out this change when it made sense because Sharpshooter was like one of the dominant comps. Right at the same time, Talon started getting popular, and Talon is basically the antithesis of Sharpshooter. So Sharpshooter has actually ended up fairly weak, but not because of these changes. Rather, the meta shifting and their weaknesses being exposed. So in the end, because of that, I think this was still the right change to make. But like you said, I think there's a lot more work to do, especially when it comes to where the power distribution of Sharpshooter is. Right now, it feels like it's so backloaded into Jinx, and if you have the right Jinx and the right Jinx items. So hopefully there's a world where we can shift Sharpshooter into, other carries that can do well. But I will say it seems like 4 Sharpshooter in particular has found its spot as a Stage 3, Stage 4 transition into a late game comp right now. So not a big deal there. Pretty happy with that. All right, on to champions. Fiora, we changed her Chosen from health to max mana reduction. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of us experimenting to see if we could really make certain Chosen, more attractive by adjusting the kind of bonus stat that they get. It made a lot of sense for Fiora, especially because she's an Enlightened. This like kind of dream of going infinite with her parry and just or riposte and keep doing the invulns and stuff. But I haven't really seen much experimentation, like successful experimentation, at least with this. I do think she's probably more powerful in the later half of the game with this change, but I honestly haven't seen much success with it. So
I've tried it a bit, and it seems like it's okay, but it didn't really solve her fundamental problem, which is if she gets hit with a CC at any point, she's gone. She just doesn't have the tankiness to survive while being CC'd. So I think hopefully some further adjustments down the line can put it in a good spot. So I think long term, this is the right call. I think short term, it didn't really do much though. So,
yeah,
Lissandra, I want to talk about this one. I'm really happy with how this change turned out, but almost for the wrong reason. I think no one's really putting in Lissandra in their Dazzler comp to like solve a problem. But it's like, oh, it'll definitely target the AD, and that's how I'll win fights. So it didn't really hit that, goal. But the Lissandra comp, the Moonlight Lissandra carry comp, has opted now as a very good counter to the Talon comp and helped keep that in check, as well as the Ashe comp, to the point where it's actually made Lissandra, I think, the best of the Moonlight comps. So that part was kind of cool to see. So...
yeah, I'm only nervous in that I know we got a lot of flack from the high level players around her becoming a lot weaker in the early game because of this targeting change. I'm I haven't experimented personally enough with it to have a strong opinion, but I know conceptually I still like this. I mean, we talked about it in the last patch review. Conceptually, I think it made a lot of sense and was a nice experimentation into some different ways of spell targeting that we will probably explore further, in future sets as well. So
Sweet. Vayne buff to her spell. Seems like a pretty solid buff. We've actually seen some Vayne 3s be carries even at high elo in Korea. But doesn't also seem to be like harming the meta and shifting it into Vayne reroll. So seems like a slam dunk.
yeah, I mean, this is just Kent's magic tuning, man. Just found the numbers. What can I say?
There you go.
Did a good job.
I still think Dusk Vayne is a little too weak, but who
Yeah.
knows? Who knows?
Yeah, it's fair.
Okay, Vi chosen. We switched from health to max mana regen. I think we're gonna have different opinions on this one. I'm curious your thoughts first.
You mean the whole thing, or just that specific change, like the Vi suite?
Oh, that's true. We should talk about the whole suite because there was also the spell damage at 3-star and the armor shred duration. So,
yeah, I mean, I think it. Just regarding the chosen bonus, Vi did feel like she was almost more like a brawler bot before this patch. Maybe she still does, but I feel like the changes we made did give her some cool outs. I know I saw some YouTube videos of players experimenting with 3-star Vi. I personally done it in a couple of internal playtests as well, and actually was pretty successful. It's obviously not like a top tier build, but I almost feel like that might be more of a condemnation against the Warlord composition as a whole. But yeah, I'm interested in what you think more.
So I played a lot of Vi. Vi was one of the champions I played a lot of on my purposeful demotion of my account as I was trying new things for the system stuff. I dropped all the way to Diamond 2 as I was trying stuff on purpose. But the thing I think I struggled with Vi is that in my mind I want her to be a carry that like you put some items on and she can win the comp. And she's never going to be that. Like no matter what these numbers are, I don't think there's a healthy world where that's the case. But I have seen a lot of people use her as a successful transition carry. It's like, oh, at that 2-2 level 4, you get chosen Vi. Cool. You run 3 Warlord, use that, carry that to stage 6, stage 7, swap out. That's where it seems like she's been pretty successful. That being said, I don't think the health to mana reduction change really changed that. I think that was already true beforehand. I think it was true after. I think buffing her 3-star, while good, was like not really changing. You're not investing items in 3-star Vi. The one positive thing here I'll say is the armor shred duration I think will go great with these Injiao changes coming in 1023. Seeing the two of them work together is actually pretty cool. So that seems cool long term. But yeah, short term it's just like making Vi carry just never seems to work. So
yeah, I mean, like it's a double-edged sword in these situations. I feel like we're opening up some potential experimental doors, but at the same time, we may be baiting players to just play a bad carry. But
yeah.
Yeah.
And it sucks, right? Because like you can't buff her too much more at 2-star, otherwise you're just buffing the Brawler Ashe comp. So it's pretty tricky.
Yeah.
Okay, Akali 3. I was really positive going on to this change, and we shipped it, and I think it was still correct. I think blue buff Akali has gone down in power, maybe a little too much. But, as you'll see with the upcoming patch, I think this has given us room to then buff base Akali. So we're not having to buff around that hyper blue buff only version. So
yeah, I mean, this is... we haven't messed around too much with this mana lock. I know this is actually a mechanic that a lot of players may not actually understand super clearly. But essentially, after a character's spell casts, there's a certain amount of time in which they will not generate mana that we have in the game to kind of just keep the pace of the game at the way we want it to be. So Akali's using a slightly irregular one just because she was so powerful with blue buff. And so hopefully, like Mort said, in the future we can tune her better. But I think this may have... It's unfortunately for me, like it hit her a little too hard. Like it seems like, oh, only a quarter second. But it's just every single spell cast is a quarter second up. It's just a lot of time where she's not generating mana. And so I think it hit her harder than I would have liked. But we plan to do some stuff in the future to hopefully bring her back up to a stronger spot, but also have more diverse builds, hopefully, instead of just always blue buff, always blue buff.
yeah, blue buff RFC every game, all game. Yep. Okay, I'll talk about these two in unison. Evelynn 3 and Nunu 3 buffs. What are your thoughts here?
I mean, Evelynn, I've actually seen people try to 3-star her now instead of just ignore her. I don't think it necessarily like turned her into like a let's itemize her, all the time or anything like that. But I do get happy when at least it doesn't feel bad to 3-star a unit. I think that's what it did for her. For Nunu, I know we may have even overshot here. I think he's quite scary when he goes off, and it seems like Nunu's just waiting for the right like meta to just like completely take over or something. I don't know. I'm scared, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, directionally, I really like these changes. I think we swung a little too hard, is my personal opinion. But if you had told me this was like 1,200 for Evelynn and 1,600 for Nunu, I would have been like, perfect, sounds good. So, but the nice thing is, it hasn't done any harm to the meta. And like you said, if anything, it's just been create some more cool experiences when people hit these. So, in that regard, I think it's just a win. So, I'll take it. Okay, Ahri, we have to break down a little bit because there was the Ahri change, first off, which was lowering her spell damage by 25 at 1 star, 75 at 2, which then put her in a state. Then we had the B patch that hit Chalice and Jeweled Gauntlet, which put her in a weaker state even further. So let's talk about the first state and then the second. Any thoughts on those?
My brain just got confused. But anyways, I will try to follow along as best as I can. Yeah, so I mean, the original nerf, she was kind of dominating the meta post, I guess post like
War Week,
and
yeah,
post Sharpshooter, stuff. She kind of just took over. It just felt like she was really hard to play against because she played in a comp that buys a lot of time, and all she needs is one cast and literally kill almost your entire team, unless she gets really unlucky and like hits one corner unit or something. So I feel like very positive about what we did for that. The damage numbers for this specific patch, I experimented with some stuff in the future that you guys will see that I think makes playing against Ahri a bit better. But for the time, I think that was good. Then talking about the second part where we hotfixed the spell power items, that probably did hit her too much at the end of the day combined. But we really wanted to do the work to make the spell power items into a better balance because it was kind of like Chalice was the best by far, and then JG was like the obvious damage spell power item, and Deathcap was just kind of sad. I think putting those items into that right spot was the right call, but it unfortunately put Ahri a little bit lower than we would have wanted her. Yeah. I still heard people say they had success with her though, so I mean it's just like a high roll thing or a specific item builds.
Yeah, I think the big thing here is that it was kind of this shows one of the issues with our pace of development where it was just like we're literally like changing Ahri then changing the items real quick because like you said, I think these numbers were correct assuming the item changes. Then we made the item changes, which I think were also correct. But the combination of the two, I think, has put Ahri in just slightly too weak of a spot. Where now it's like, unless you really have the perfect Ahri of like double Jeweled Gauntlet plus double Chalice, she's not really that threatening. The other thing I'll call out is, again, like the meta kind of worked against her, where now everyone's basically including 2 Mystic and or 4 Mystic and Spread Out and Talon. So like all of those things in conjunction also have put her in a little bit weak of a spot. But overall, I think we've kind of ended up okay there, so it is what it is.
I mean, Ahri just like the gangplank of galaxies. It's just her damage numbers, like it's so small. Like the difference between her being like the strongest unit and like a B tier unit is just such a small difference. Yep. It's crazy.
Yep. All right, Ashe bug fix. This had no ramifications, right?
I knew it was going to have an impact, but it was hard for me to know because she was already performing so well with so many different items. I was like, how bad could it be if IE is a good item on her? And it's like, it turns out to be like a pretty huge impact if they don't have a significant amount of armor or like Bramble, I still think we should have done this bug fix, but maybe we should have been more aware of how much it would affect her actual DPS output.
Yeah. I think the other big thing is seeing the shift, because like Brawler Ashe doesn't actually seem like it's that out of line right now. But as we shifted into the more Hunter Adept Ashe, and people have optimized that build combined with the bug fix, and especially because IE is such a better item in the Hunter build versus like the old Giant Slayer style people were running, Like all of those things in conjunction have definitely pushed Ashe a little bit over the edge. So
Yeah, it always feels bad for me to just like it's like we did a bug fix, but it's kind of like a buff fix, if you want to call it. You know, like it's definitely buffing here because even if you don't itemize crit, all characters have a base crit chance, and she was basically gaining bonus damage via that. And you could say like the dodge part was offsetting that, but probably not not that relevant. So in those cases, you know, a question. This is a question for me to you, Mort. It's like, should we have like pre-nerfed her, knowing that this was like a buff bug fix?
Uh, in this, I mean, it's hard to be not unfair and be like hindsight 2020. Like, of course, we should have nerfed her just a little bit, but this is one that honestly, if I were in your shoes, I probably would have missed. Also, I probably would have not hit it because it's like, let's just fix the bug and see where we go from there. So, yeah, it's a tricky one, but. Yeah. Obviously, in hindsight, it's like, yeah, we should have thrown on a 5 AD nerf or a 5% off her spell, you know, kind of thing. But beforehand, hard to tell. So, all right, Morgana, why don't you talk about the first part of Morgana, then I'll talk about the second part.
Yeah, so I mean, the first part was actually the main thing we meant to change about the character. We had iterated with a bunch of different changes with her over the course of that patch, the 1022 patch cycle, intending to buff her because she was actually the weakest for costs by a decent margin, and according to our data. So we tried a bunch of things, and we found that she was actually really just effective. And then we were like, wait, why is she representing such low data? And then we just basically decided, you know, maybe we can reduce her randomness and make her a little bit more consistent, because when you apply 3 items to her and then she throws the pool at like the corner Jhin, and then like you just lose the fight because she's literally not doing, you know, spreading her Morellos to all those units that she should be. We had to balance though just a little bit because we didn't want to give her fully smart targeting. Like we have the option to just make her like target the most, you know, biggest clump of enemies, but found a middle ground in between where she's kind of like choosing between 2 random targets and finding the better of the 2. So it's possible that she can still throw, you know, corner pools, but it's really rare. So that kind of variance is something that we, you know, on the design team, we think is good for the game, but we just don't want it to be so random that it just feels like you don't want to ever itemize this character. So yep. that was our intended change, and then you can follow.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that change worked out. That change has been good for the game, but unfortunately there was a mistake, and I'll try not to go too long on this, because obviously the mistake happened. I had to tweet out, hey, it was an accidental buff, which then everyone's like, well, how did this happen? How did the team miss it? It's impossible. So let me describe it. Right now, you know, the team is growing. We're getting new people on the team, new people working. Cool, good stuff. One of those new people was like, as we talked about, Morgana was looking weak. We tried out some buffs. During the 1022 PBE cycle, we tried out some Morgana buffs. We upped her spell damage. And in our testing, we all kind of agreed, this is too much. She doesn't need this. We should take this out. So we were all like, cool, let's take this out. The person agreed, take this out. Went to check in the file. Due to an error, file didn't get checked in. It happens. It's a slip up. Human errors happen. If you're an adult and you've ever had a job before, sometimes mistakes happen. The trick is you learn from them and you get better. And so we noticed after the patch went live that like, wow, she was doing a little more than we thought. And the funny thing is, no one really noticed player-wise. Like, no one jumped out and was like, these numbers are wrong, look at this. We got a lot of this champ's broken with this new change, but no one was really noticing this. And it's the kind of thing we could have probably gotten away with not telling anybody. But because, you know, we like to be open and honest and transparent, we're like, yo, look, you guys should know, oops, we buffed this. And I'll be honest, a lot of people were really, frankly, over-toxic about it. It's like it was a mistake. It went live Wednesday. We fixed it Friday. 2 days seems like a reasonable turnaround for getting a change to across the globe. So please work with us to be a little bit more, you know, a little less toxic about this stuff. And, you know, that employee learned from their mistake. Cool, no big deal. You know, they shouldn't have to, like, live in fear. We're not firing anybody over an accidental change like this. Like, come on, grow up.
Yeah, for sure. I think just to end on a positive note, like, the team that does the like hot fixes, the micro patches for us, is like, they're just amazing. They got that thing out so fast. It was insane. So
yeah. Their willingness to help us out has been great. So cool. All right, let's keep moving on. Ezreal, Starting mono buff. I think this is just a slam dunk. Ezreal seems more desirable now. Cool. Happy days.
Yeah. I'm happy with it for sure. I think that was my theory. Was like, hey, like Ezreal's got so much going for him, but like he just seems to not get off, and his spell needs to go off at an early point in the fight because it's all about like swinging, the health bars and the attack speed and everything. Honestly, I feel like his spell is still a little bit overloaded from a design perspective, but I think this change itself put him in a much better spot for sure.
Yep, agreed. Cool. Lee Sin. So I know you made this change, but I'm going to talk about this one a little bit.
Yeah.
I generally agreed with the goal here, which was Lee Sin was providing way too much CC to a comp, where it was like, not only do I take the target I'm trying to kill and stun them for a long ass duration, but I also stun everyone I knock them into, which was a lot of what he was doing. And so generally you were like, hey, we should reduce that. We should lower the CC duration. I think for me, though, this ended up being a bit of a miss. It kind of broke some of his more fun builds. RFC Lee Sin, for example, now gets in a situation where like they unstun before he can hit again, and like you just get into like this weird infinite loop situation. I personally would have liked to see more. We just remove the secondary stun completely, so that Lee Sin's role was like I get on a target and I eventually kill them, and that's my job. So this to me felt like a bit of a miss and has made Lee Sin go from like highly desirable to meh.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I think there was probably a number between what he used to be at and where it is now that probably would have been a lot healthier for him. I think I was just a little bit baited by aligning the stun durations together, but it honestly probably wasn't necessary. I do feel like it's nice that the unit he's punching has a chance to potentially cast their spell before they die, but it might be just giving them way too much ability to counteract the only thing Lee Sin does, which is try to kick you off the map. So
yeah, my thought there is that like the way they get a chance is their allies help them, right? Like you CC Lee Sin, you might get out of your CC. But between like Lee Sin and Yone and Sejuani, we already have so much AoE CC that like having Lee Sin be another AoE CC provider, that's where I'm like, ugh.
Yeah, so, for sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, Lilia change. This just seems like... So, Lilia's in this weird spot right now where I think she's the most unremarkable 5-cost, but not bad. Like, she provides value to her team, especially if you're running 3 or 6 mage. She does good CC and decent damage, and this change buffed that and made her better. But I don't think we're ever going to get over the fact that people are just going to look at Lilia and be like, meh.
Yeah, I think she's like, just from like a thematic perspective, she's not as exciting as some of the other ones for sure. And then I think, unfortunately, like the way her traits are set up, she's really tied to at least having Mage 3. I feel like without Mage 3, you just don't get that double sleep, and it's just like, man, that's just so powerful. Yep. So she's a little weird one for sure.
Yep. All right, set chosen bonus. Unless I'm wrong, we've barely seen this. This is just like a non-issue, and if you get chosen set, cool, have fun. The sure. primary target duration, the primary target buff, I think this was a slam dunk. I think it took set from a champ that most people looked at and went, no thank you, to actually decent. And what's really cool is, especially at 2-star, when that set grabs that target takes a lot of damage, especially if you have an AP item or two. Like, they just die and it feels good. So that was cool to see.
Yeah, I'm still a little worried that maybe I didn't go far enough, because like I was scared to buff his AoE damage. Honestly, looking at the numbers already, I was like, it's kind of big already, and so this is kind of was the next obvious one, because we didn't really want to mess with the mana again, because that was the thing we changed at the early part of the set. Yeah. Oh my god, the early part of the set, because he was just like doing his his slam so many times within one combat. So I think this was the only obvious way. I'm happy to hear that people have been finding success with it, but I almost felt like it wasn't enough, even though the number looks gigantic for sure. It looks gigantic.
I think there's still work to do, especially with the whole like he loses his mana right when he gets sent back to do his push-ups. Yeah. That one always feels bad. And then just in general, like how hard is it to get a cast before he goes and does his first workout? So there's still some work to do, I agree, but I think directionally good stuff here. So
yeah, have to fix the bugs on him.
Yeah. Nunu no longer eating set. Good. 3-cost probably shouldn't invalidate 5-cost. Cool. Okay, Ludens. this seems fine. This seems to have changed very little. So, happy days there.
Yeah, I mean, I know, just to give a little insight, like it's cool that Ludens has finally found a place, but we're still kind of a little unhappy that it's literally like only one character. Like Nami's like the only Ludens user, I think, maybe. Which is, it's better than zero, but our goal with items is ideally to have more than, just one user per set. So.
Okay, death cap going to 75, and then eventually on the B patch to 80. Seems like a slam dunk. Death cap's a little more worth building. Cool. No argument from me. Hurricane. This one's been interesting. Any thoughts on Hurricane?
I mean, I do think it has opened it up a little to not just being like a bad item you have to pick up on the carousel sometimes, or get forced from an item drop or whatever. But in terms of like who uses it well, it kind of just stayed in the same spot. I know people were theorizing like, oh my god, Jhin, it's gonna be so crazy with it, but I don't think it's actually played out that way. Feels like Zed and Warwick actually are the two main benefactors of this buff.
See, that's the one I wanted to talk about a bit, because I think when you look at this item, you're like, oh, Ashe and Jhin and Kalista, and that hasn't really played out. The Zed one we expected, and like that's fine. But the Warwick one, I admit I wasn't expecting. And again, this is another sign of like Warwick with AoE effects like Shiv and Hurricane does weird things. So
yeah, that's a synergy. I feel like even after Shiv Warwick, it's like we just couldn't. We didn't expect it as much as it actually ended up happening.
Yep.
So I wonder if it's just in general, like we're just not experimenting enough with different item builds. It just feels like it's maybe the way the game's being played is becoming a little like. Constrained. Yeah.
I think in particular though, Warwick's design of on assist get the fear versus like if he kills his primary target is kind of like leading to these kind of situations as well. So
yeah, just like tag a bunch of people and then get a bunch of effects. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, Statikk Shiv. What are your thoughts on this one?
I'm glad. I was scared with the numbers that I put on there, but it feels like the item is in an okay spot. It's one of the weaker items in the set, but I don't think it's really easy for this item to get out of control. I still believe, a lot of Warwick is still attributed to Shiv and the way it was working with the CCs. But I'm happy to see that it's actually like a playable item, even if it's not the best. And it has an interesting spot in the meta. Especially if it's weird because it doesn't really counter like certain shield units, like let's say like Riven, because she's so repeatable. But like I think against like if Keeper becomes meta, I feel like this is actually gonna be quite a good item. But yeah,
I think for a quick number change, this was about as aggressive as you can get. I think long term we've got to find a better way to get Shiv into the meta and not just only on high attack speed, but usually still worse than IE Deathblade anyway. So yeah. We'll have to figure something out.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Zeke's seems like a slam dunk. 35 seems like it's finally in like the right spot where it's good and not overpowered.
Yeah, I mean for both Chalice, I think both Chalice and Zeke's were at 30%, and then I overbuffed them to 40%, and then it turned out it was Goldilocks 35% for both of them. So.
Yeah, they seem good at 35. So, Zerat Portal. This seemed like another good change, fix some bugs, but we've still seen some other bugs with Zerat Portal, so we're just going to have to continue to keep fixing bugs. So, pretty straightforward.
I even fixed some again this patch, but I think there's even more than in 1023 or 1024 at this point. So,
fixed a bug, bug. Cool. And then, we did the B patch / hotfix on October 30th, 2 days later, where we undid the Morgana oopsie. So, cool. And then Chalice at 35, like you said, Goldilocks that. Jeweled Gauntlet from 50 to 40. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I still think the item is really great still. It feels like it's always by default going to have to be an item that's like, a little bit high rolly. Like when I get the crits, like I'm going off because otherwise it's just better than all the other options, period, which I think it was at 50%. So I'm happy with putting it down, but it was kind of potentially holding up a couple of builds and making those builds really prominent, and particularly with Ahri. So that's my only thought, really.
Cool. And then Rabadon's cool, good times. Okay, so couple things I want to wrap up with. So after obviously the shitty Morgana start, we shipped that out, and now the meta seems to be in a good spot. Two things I want to talk about. One is that player perception has been really fascinating, because while we've definitely seen some people like say Grand Vice, Raditz, other people like that who are like, yeah, meta's in a good spot, things are good. Sox has been another vocal one. There's definitely a lot of like when you hit the like master to diamond level, that's like Ashe and Talon are the only playable comps, even though plenty of evidence shows that to the contrary. And so it seems like long term we're just going to have this battle where it's like perception versus reality is going to be a challenge for us as far as like what's actually good for the meta and what's not.
Yeah, I feel like it's always really easy to be like, hey, the obvious strategy is like the only strategy. But I do think right now the meta is in a spot where, of course, there are some top tier strategies, but I feel like there's a lot of ways to sneak wins against them. I do think this is where the champ bag systems are actually helping us and like, making sure that the Ashe and Talon are a bit more under control. But yeah, it's something that we're gonna have to keep working on in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big one. And then the other thing I'll throw out is that while we actually have like the item balance in a good spot and the champion balance in a pretty close to good, not perfect, still some room, but like not bad. The system side of things is where the game right now feels like it's kind of falling apart, because this whole like play the early game however barely matters, get to 4-1, roll down bullshit is just definitely not very fun. And it's, again, highest challenger level players have kind of figured out ways around this, but like again, that low grandmaster master diamond level is just like, I rolled down at 4-1, I didn't hit, guess I lose. And so that has been kind of a big negative so far that we'll be looking to fix hopefully in 1024. So
Yeah, for sure. I think the like leveling meta, or like how the leveling in econ meta has gotten a little stale, and part of that was like the leveling changes we made, which have had some really great things, but also had some bad consequences. So we're looking to like modify some of those things. I also think like I personally just miss the galaxies from set 3 in terms of like how much they made me change how I was approaching certain games. So
yeah,
that's one thing that I think we don't have the benefit of. Even though Chosen's been an awesome system, it doesn't necessarily give that the galaxies feel, for better or for worse sometimes.
yeah. Chosen's been like a good and bad, because like for everything it does that kind of like paints you a picture, and you get like that Chosen Diana, which opens up a build you might not normally play. Then there's the game where it's just like you get the Chosen Xin Zhao and the Chosen Yumi, and you're just like, what do I do? Yeah. So definitely some work to do there. So, all right, that's going to do it for the 1022 post-mortem. As always, if you enjoy these, let us know and we'll keep doing them. If not, we'll stop. So, yeah, that's it for now. On behalf of everyone on the TFT team, that's going to do it. Take it easy.